morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on which part of the world you're joining from, and every part of the world, I'm sure. Welcome to day 5 of the RISE Pico World Summit 2025, the 12th edition of a very unique convening of thought leaders, practitioners, learners, and the spectrum in between. What is uncommon about them is the spirit to collaborate for the greater good. And what is common about them is the belief in the RISE values: responsible, inclusive, sustainable, and ecosystem friendly, as you just saw in the video that was shared. The summit got off to a resounding start 4 days ago, and we are almost in the last leg of it. It is over 100 plus sessions co-created and co-located in multiple cities with almost the same number of partners and over 200 experts from around the globe for a community that is now 9,000 strong from 83 countries. We do hope you will take the time to join us in the remaining 2 days and, of course, explore the platform for many more resources and information throughout this week. Welcome also to the ESG plenary this morning because, as you know, every day is a separate thematic so that we definitely look at the issues that are facing our world. And today's plenary is based on value-based organizations navigating a complex, contrast, but interconnected world. Well, have you heard about VUCA, Bani, Rupt, or Tuna? Yes, these are acronyms that have been floating around, and perhaps the most known and popular is VUCA, obviously, which stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And yes, all of these, whether it's the VUCA, Bani, Rupt, or Tuna, describe the challenges of the 21st century and the problems we are all grappling with. But are they just problems? Or are they also opportunities to change, to transform, to create a new world that is really equitable and sustainable? To talk more about this, I have with me two people who are constantly dealing with these issues. Global thought leaders who share their expertise and experience around the world to navigate these difficult times, but also, as I said, create opportunities for the future. May I invite on stage to join me Mr. Ayush Gupta, Director HR, GAIL India, and Ms. Madhur Singh, Writer-Editor, World Economic Forum, and a communication specialist in sustainability, circularity, and a climate community. Good morning, Mr.
Hello.
Gupta. Good morning, Madhur. Really pleased to
Good
have you
morning.
both.
Hi, Karon. Very happy to be here.
Absolutely. And, today is, of course, like I said, the plenary on ESG. Both of you are dealing with this day in and day out. And, just before we start, I'm going to just give the full form of these words because, these acronyms that we constantly keep hearing about. And I'd love to hear which one you like. I want you to pick up one which really resonates with you and maybe start with that. Yeah. So we talk about VUCA, of course, I already said, was volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, right? So Bani is brittle, anxious, non-linear, and incomprehensible. Then Rupt is rapid, unpredictable, paradoxal, and tangled. And then, of course, we have Tuna, which is turbulent, uncertain, novel, and ambiguous. So, Ayush, you are the youngest board member, okay, on the GAIL board. Youngest. What a privilege, right? And
Thank you.
speak volume of your expertise and what you have been doing. So today ESG has become a big issue in boardrooms, right? And of course, Madhur also has been a board member. So maybe you can tell us what it is like. Do these words even come up when you are talking, or is it like this is just gyan? Yeah.
No, good morning, all. And first of all, my heartiest congratulations for successfully running this event for last 12 years. And since last 5 days, today is the fifth day, last 4 days. And deriving excellent participation from across the world. So the way the summit has been planned and it has been going on, I had been following it for last 2 years now. And I must say it is bringing diverse speakers, diverse participants into the platform, which helps to discuss and navigate through some of these challenges which we have been talking about. And talking about the boardroom in GAIL or in general any boardroom, I think these are the words or terms we can't live without talking about. Our day in and day out, every discussion is centered around these critical aspects. And the business environment is becoming such volatile across the world and it is getting affected from so many factors. It's no longer a straight line business where you come and buy and sell things and go away. All this, even a simple buying and selling in a shop is getting affected by so many things which is happening across the world. You will not even imagine that a shopkeeper sitting in Delhi or a tier 3 city in India getting affected by something happening across the world in America or Ukraine in Russia. So these are the uncertainties which are affecting our day-to-day life. We have seen how COVID affected, disrupted the world, and as you said, every disruption or uncertainty brings a lot of opportunities and challenges also for us to encounter. If COVID has been, we have much has been talked about it, it will be kind of a repetition only. The kind of problems it brought about, the kind of uncertainties it brought about, the fear it brought about. But then such platforms like the which we are talking now has become popular. The entire way the corporate world works has changed, especially in the IT sector and those things. There has been a sea change. So these are some of the terms which, as I said, we can't live without it, and day in and day out, these are the challenges we have to face. It's not just that it is being talked about, it's not just a fanfare of being have something to be on the nameplate or website that we are doing this, but these are real challenges that we have to face it. And if we don't act upon these things now, uh, as you said in the rough, one thing is rapid. You will be soon wiped out from the business. People will forget about you. So that it's the time to act. It's time to take action on some of the critical elements to make the business sustainable, to make it profitable, to make it responsible, and to achieve the organizational goal. Above all, any organization, any business organization is out there in the world to do business, to earn profit. As you earn profit, you earn revenues, then only you are able to contribute and flow back the goods to the society. So that always remain at the forefront. But what is to be kept in mind, it should not be at the cost of the core values of ethics, integrity, and responsibility, which for which any organization stands.
Absolutely. So true. I mean, like you said, at the end of the day, it's about values, right? And that is exactly what we reinforce right here at the Rise Peak Oval Summit. And thank you for your kind words. That was really nice. Madhur, as Ayush just mentioned, it is all about what the board is tackling with day in and day out. You've been a board member, you've been at the World Economic Forum for multiple years. What do you see happening in the boardrooms? How does ESG really play out for them?
Yeah. I'll clarify one point here. I've been on boards of mostly NGOs, which is very different from corporations. But increasingly, ESG is starting to have a big resonance there as well. Not only for NGOs that are working in streams that we'd imagine are directly related to ESG, for instance, waste management, but also those that are, let's say, working for entrepreneurship among rural women, education. So there is an increasing awareness that in their own operations, they need to be more ESG aligned. A lot of that is coming from a sort of CSR spillover because corporates that fund or foundations that fund NGOs are keen to show the data from their own ESG achievements, meeting their own targets. And they're increasingly asking everybody that they're funding to also provide data. So, for instance, you might be a battery maker, you have a CSR mandate, you go out and fund a self-help group of rural women who are, let's say, utilizing clean burn stoves and thereby reducing their emissions. And all of this can be then taken up the supply chain, and it helps the NGOs raise money. It helps the corporate offset a lot of their own emissions and meet their ESG targets. So increasingly many different ways, not only because NGOs, as we know, are civil society, they are more aligned with sustainability objectives and goals. So there is an increasing awareness about ESG as such, but also from a more practical point of view of fundraising.
Thank you so much for linking the supply chain. You are very right. I mean, of course, there are boardrooms of corporates at one end, and then you have the boardrooms of, NGO, civil society, and other kind of organizations. So, but understanding that linkage is equally important. So, thank you for drawing that out for us. We spoke about both, but when we're talking of a value-based organization, okay, what happens is you can't just stop at the board, right? At the end of the day, we are talking about, how does it trickle down? And so whether it is the senior management or it is even at the entry point, how do you get, members of the team, bring the organizational teams to really understand and appreciate the concept of a value-based organization? How do you really get that to happen? What do you need to do to move from a compliance mindset to a really commitment mindset that these are things that are important to us? Yeah. Ayush, you are the director of HR also at GAIL India Limited. So I think that's the next hat which you're wearing, because I know you wear multiple hats again, the same as Madhur. So, maybe from that HR perspective, if you can let us now know, would be really nice. Thank you.
See, in my experience over 30 years now in an organization and with over 26 years within the same organization, where I have not only handled HR, but I have handled for multiple years, the recruitment also, getting the young people on board in the organization. One thing which is we must accept is that everything starts with a compliance in an organization. Anything if we talk of ESG or core values, it starts with compliance. So compliance makes it becomes enforceable that you need to do. You start with compliance, there's a resistance. Initial lot of when you are trying to change and asking somebody to comply with certain things, whether within our home, if we talk of our children also, we can experience that. There's a resistance to it when you ask them to comply. But then over the years, once the people or the organizational members understands, this becomes routine that this needs to be done, this is important, then it moves from compliance to acceptance that, okay, this is what we need to do, this is what is acceptable. And at that point of time, it turns from compliance to a value of the organization. We start valuing what we are doing. We do it for 3-4 years as a compliance, as a force. People have to be after you to get it done. You'll have to have supervisors or HR or other regulatory departments following up with you whether it has been done or not in time. But then within a period of, it will depend from organization to organization, but my experience says within a period of 3 to 4 years, it becomes if it's a big organization, it becomes widely accepted and people start following it. And that is where, as I said, it becomes a value of the organization, which in the next stage of acceptance, in another 1 or 2 years, people start respecting it. And that is the turning point in any organization. When our own employees start respecting those values, that is where it gets translated to any new entrant which comes. Unless I am respecting core values of my organization, I can't expect my team members to value it or to accept it or to implement it. So these are 3 stages which I feel are very important in terms of when we say a responsible organization or a value-based organization. And We want to see the employees or the team members within the organization or the stakeholders not just accept it, they comply with it, they accept it, and then they respect it. I think that is the way I see it as a core value-based organization, or the motive of an organization that should be.
Wow, I think that was the most simplest and yet very, very practical explanation of the process. Ayushji, thank you so much. I think I'm going to take this back to my own team while I work on this aspect of compliance through commitment. I don't think even I have ever explained it in such a simple term. And of course, your 30 plus years shows through, shines through, not just shows through, but shines through in this wonderful explanation, and very profound. And so I hope everyone who's listening in, whether you are a senior management board member or even you are a junior staff member, I think such an important and profound statement. How do you move from compliance to commitment? And also one more thing which you said is like it will take 3 to 4 years for the initial stage to change. I think that again tells us we have to have the patience. Right? I mean, of course, that's for a larger organization, hopefully for a smaller organization, much faster, because I'm all the time thinking of my own organization in this perspective. But very, very, very practical, as I said. And I'm sure many of us are going to take this back to ensure that we relook at our organizations to understand this change process and make it happen within our own organizations. So thank you, Ayushji, for giving us that insight.
If I can just add on to what I said as an example, if the world is talking about achieving net zero, it can't happen overnight. We need to have patience. We need to have a roadmap to achieve it. It will take a lot of efforts, again, from compliance to commitment part, before we will be able to achieve it together. One organization achieving it will not help. Entire organizations across the world have to achieve it. That is where we'll be able to achieve net zero as a society. So that is something we need to work together as a team to achieve those things, and that is true for any core value within the organization. Unless each and every member of the organization accepts it and respects it, the goal is not achieved.
And you know, that's a perfect segue for Madhur, because that's her core, I mean, literally core, what should I say, competency, passion, work, whatever word and terminology you want to use. So Madhur, you've been doing a lot on circularity, sustainability, right? And climate action. You know, how do you see this, or what do you think needs to be done, or what are the mindset changes so that we can actually achieve some of these goals that we are setting out for ourselves to do? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really, really vast area of action, Karon. I'll try to break it down into just two or three that I think I've tackled in my personal work. So I offer ESG trainings mostly to smaller organizations and also to organizations that are not yet mandated by the government, which, as we know in India, the BRSR mandate applies to the top 1,000 listed companies. So these could be organizations that have a role in the global supply chain, so textiles, auto parts, and so on, but who may not need to furnish reports, sustainability reporting, ESG reporting, but they need to at least furnish the data that their supply chains themselves need to, that their buyers themselves need to submit to their regulators in Europe or elsewhere. So that's one part of it. I see a big role for learning and development in HR for trainings of all nature within organizations of all sizes to create the sort of base level understanding that is imperative to even begin the conversation towards sustainability of any kind. And frankly, we know most businesses in India are SMEs, and most of them do not yet have either the mind space or the funds, frankly, to invest in people, getting their people trained. But that's gradually starting to happen. If not, like Ayush said, a lot happens because of a mandate. So whether it's the government saying that, or if your buyer up the supply chain is saying that. So that's one part of it. Just ensuring that there is understanding and awareness at all levels in an organization. More broadly within society, I think that's a bigger challenge. I'll pick up from where Ayush said about, teaching our children about sustainability. Sometimes it's the reverse. We need to teach our elders about sustainability. Now, in my own case, I've seen that, my parents' generation, for them, affluence and doing well came from a very sort of American angle, like they had relatives in Canada, so someone brought home paper towels, so that was a sign that you'd arrived. So it's very hard to tell my mother not to use a paper towel, right? Increasingly, it's very hard to help people break the inertia to not just toss away a mobile phone into a drawer, and then to take it to maybe hand it over to an EPR program, turn it back in, or have it repaired, right? Or make sure someone is using it. So behavioral change is the second aspect of it. And so more and more NGOs I see are engaging with behavior change specialists. More and more behavior change specialists are actually seeing the value of engaging with organizations, whether they're for-profits or non-profits, because it really goes a long way. And the third pillar really is education for children. If we are not able to get through to the next generation, a lot of it is already happening. Schools are very, curriculum, CBSE, international boards, all of them are very, very, today very imbued with that spirit. Yet, for that to translate into 360 degrees awareness and action and responsibility is a big loop to close.
Again, here in terms of training, we constantly talk about training in a very, continuous manner that yes, we need to create training. But if that training is not along with it, taken into consideration behavior change, as a continuum that you need to kind of follow that up, as you rightly said, then you're not going to be able to get the kind of results that you're looking to do. So you can, technically train people, but if you don't look at the soft side, the behavior change side and the mindsets, then you're not going to. So I think it's the why, right? You might train and people know the how, that, oh, I need to, recycle, I need to change. So that how we teach a lot, we train a lot for that. But the why do we need to do this? I think more often than not gets lost, right? And so I usually one more time, one more hat in terms of the training that you do and organize for all your senior managers, as well as all your obviously staff members. Maybe you can give us some insights into how do you plan that? How do you assess it? And what happens there?
See, again, when we talk of training, and again, we'll take example of big corporates. There are two parts. One, it comes from compliance that every employee must get of training in a year. So that we have to comply that every employee is getting an opportunity to be trained. But the more important part of it, how to make that training effective. Giving 2 days, 3 days of classroom training is not a difficult task. And covering 5,000 employees and 3 days of training, we can always ensure that compliance. But the difficult task of it is how do we make that training effective? How do I make sure that 50 participants who are sitting in the classroom, they are attentive to what is being taught by the faculty member? I can bring the best of the faculty from the world to the classroom. That is not a challenge for me. From across the world, you name the person, it is possible today to get him. If not physically, then definitely online it is possible. But then how do we make sure that the participants who are there, they are keen to listen to what is being said, they are keen to learn what is being taught by the participant, they are actively participating in the taking away, go to the workplace and implementing some of those things or sharing it with their team members remains a challenge still, I think, in organization. We talk of a return on investment on training. Training definitely is an investment, but if we look for a return on investment is something, it's a misnomer for me, that you can have very different models of Kirkpatrick model and all those things trying to evaluate the return on training. But that is something you can't do it in a quantitative manner. It is a very, very qualitative, subjective thing, how it makes a difference in the life of a person. We talked about a change in behavior. Earlier days, the training used to be for a safety purpose. We used to have a classroom training or practical training on how to fight a fire and how to deal with an emergency situation. But is it really, if you talk of an emergency situation where a person is fighting a fire or dealing with an accident, is it the tools which he is using for the within which that person is there, that firefighter is there. If it is behavior is not correct, if it is mindset or commitment is not there, he will not be, he might have all the tools, resources available to him, but he may not be able to fire. So how do we bring in that concept of behavior based safety? And now when we talk of teach of training, we focus more on a behavior based safety for the firefighters and all the employees, that okay, you have to change your behavior to ensure safety at workplace. Doing a work in a particular thing is okay, knowing about the machine or machinery is important, knowing about the process is important, but unless you adapt your behavior aligned with that process, the safety is always at a risk. So this is how the training on ESG and any particular topic on sustainability also has to be brought in. That we teach the concepts, we teach the terms, like you were trying to explain the terms VUCA. And if we keep on talking VUCA, raft and bani and tuna, and I don't explain what does it mean to them, it's going to be going above their head and they will not take anything from that. So explaining the terms is important, but then relating it with their own day-to-day life so that they are able to relate back to their homes, back to their workplace is very, very crucial. And I will end with just one more example, and going by my experience of going to, I think most of the reputed institutes I have gone for campus recruitment also. And especially in the HR field, when I have gone in the past for recruitment, I used to ask, labor laws is very common for HR recruitment, learn from whether the students know about the labor laws and compliances or not. So they will talk of big terms in terms of the compliances, acts, and everything. A simple question I ask: you are staying in a campus, you are staying in a hostel within the university. Tell me how this is related, which laws are applicable within your own campus, within your own this building around you. There are so many people working, there are so many things happening. How do you see which of those laws are applicable here and in what respect? 70% of the students fail to answer that. This is the example which I wanted to share, that we are, and those
Amazing.
are best of the institutes in the country teaching MBA to HR people on compliances, on labor laws, and they are not able to relate it to their day-to-day life. At a
Yeah.
help working in their house, how he or she is getting covered with any of the labor laws. People, contract people, housekeeping people working in their own institute around them, who are there serving them tea, who are serving them food in the mess, who are doing the housekeeping work, whether they are getting covered or not. So unless we are able to relate these day-to-day life, any training or any kind of classroom training or even an MBA course is not going to help us. I think
Absolutely.
that's my take.
So, I mean, absolutely true, because, like you said, unless it's relevant, unless we apply it, all knowledge has no meaning. And that's the difference between information and knowledge, right? That is how they always say. So, when we speak about behavior change and what you call it, mindsets, I think one of the biggest components of making that change happen is language. What is the language we use? And we just launched, actually, on the second day, on the SDG plenary day, we launched a program called socio-environnomic leadership program, right? We have obviously economic, we have social, and then we have socio-economic. We don't have a word that can actually say, how do you think about all three at one time? Can you imagine it? It has not yet been coined. And so we coined it and released it at the Rice Pico World Summit. Socio-environnomic, social, environment, and economic. Because we actually don't have, and if you don't have the right words to explain to people something, how do you even expect them to think? And it's no wonder that when we depict the social, environment, and economic, we use a Venn diagram. And the only time when you're talking of all the three is the smallest piece in the middle. That means we only think all three at the most minimum of all our thinking time. And it's no wonder, because we don't have a word to describe it. So I'd love to get your feedback on this word, socio-environnomic. Does it make sense to you? What do you think? Love to hear that. Anybody? I mean, please, like you said.
I love it
Madhur, would you like to go for?
using it. Yeah. Socio-environment, okay.
Yeah. Go ahead, Madhu, please. What do you think? You're writing it down. So what do you think?
Yeah, totally. It's going to take a while until it starts to slip off the tongue easily, but I love it. I think it's important, it's useful, and I'm going to be using it.
Wow, that's great testimony if you're going to be using it. And yes, any new word takes some time to roll off the tongue. But, if it makes sense, what I'm
Yeah.
just saying, if it makes sense and it is absolutely relevant and it's required, then, why should we not make that effort? We've got some huge, long, long words in the dictionary. I'm sure this is not at all anywhere that difficult in comparison. So thank you for that vote of confidence. Yeah. Ayushi, over to you, please.
Say definitely, when we talk of any social environment and economic task, whether we use it as three different words or if we are able to give a single word, that's important. That becomes more in a conversation, it becomes easier to relate and remember it always. Otherwise, if we are taking it as three separate aspects or words, very often we may ignore one of those things. And, and it's like a,
Absolutely.
again, from an organizational or technical aspect, it's like fire triangle. If you leave one part, you miss something. है ना? To if you have to fight a fire, all three, if you have to cut off one of those things, that's a reverse thing. But then if you have to ensure that the compliance is made, all three important parts, you can't miss one thing. So both social impact, environmental impact, and economic. As I said, if the organization is there, if we are doing, we only focus on social and environmental part and we forget the economic part, the organizations will not be able to sustain. So profit making, revenue generation for any business organization is important. Unless we are able to generate revenues, even the CSR mandate says that we have to contribute from 2% of the profit earned. So the profit, if the profit earning is not there, the contribution towards CSR goes away. So all these three terms are related and we can't forget, or I can't say which one is important than the other. Three are equally important. All three are equally important. And as an organization, as a business leader, we need to take care of it, make it sure that again it seeps into the culture or value of the organization. That if we are earning revenue, if we are earning profits, it is our responsibility to make sure that we give back to the society. And also, the way we are earning the revenue or the profits, we are not impacting the society or the environment or the nature in an adverse way just for the purpose of earning revenue. We need to make sure that we are protecting the environment, we are protecting the society, we are taking care of all the compliances required so that the resources which we are using are not exploited and they are taken care of in a proper and sustainable manner. So that's the need of the hour, and that's what we always need to remember.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned, of course, that the triangle, and one part, as I said, was the terminology or the language we use. So, that's the word that I said, socio-economic. But the other part is also the visual. So, as I mentioned about the Venn diagram, when you're thinking all three together, and as you rightly pointed out, Ayush, that you can always miss one of them, right? That gives you only the small triangle in the middle. But if you look at it as an axis, a three-dimensional axis, then the highest point at which you're thinking of all three is really when, or the largest space is when you think of all three. When you look at a three-dimensional image, the highest point is when you're thinking of all three. And I think that is what I would definitely want to leave with both of you, to please, as you said, seep it into cultures, to think about this, and also maybe take it back to your own organizations. And hopefully all our viewers who are just now looking at us, watching us, will also be doing this. That, the best way of thinking is when you think of all three together, because the long term relation results from it, and also what you mentioned is the ROI. Okay, the best ROI is leaving a legacy for the long term. You can be very successful in short term, you can be a shining star immediately, but to really stay and be remembered for a longer time period, to have impact for a longer time period, takes a lot more than that. And that maybe is what you require to do, is think along all the three dimensions. So, you don't even realize how time flies. We are coming to the end of our time space, but I do want to get one last set of thoughts, Madhur, from you and Ayuji, before we kind of actually close. So, any thoughts, especially maybe one last thing I would also put as a trigger, maybe could be that, ESG is getting a backlash in many of the Western countries and other places. So whether we use it as a term ESG, I think, or whether we call it any other name, the concepts are still very important. The aspects of it is very important. So what do you think about both the backlash and, of course, how do we take this forward? So last words and we'll close. Thank you.
Shall I go first?
Yes,
Yeah.
sure.
Okay. So, just to be talking about one aspect of ESG, which is the environment. Received wisdom so far, and all the negotiations at the international level have so far been based on this understanding that it's going to be the poorest countries, the poorest within poor countries, who are going to be most vulnerable to climate change. Yet over the last few weeks, we've seen the richest country in the world face infernal fires. And these are not only the poorest within that richest country, but also the richest people in the world who've also been vulnerable to these fires. And climate change is going to be a great equalizer in that way. It's going to levelize, equalize what we face. We may not face it to the same extent. Of course, a poor person already disadvantaged has a lot more at stake, a lot more to lose, a lot less resilience, of course, than someone who's got multiple homes, for instance. But everyone's going to be hit. So it's not, we have to stop pretending it is someone else's problem. It is everybody's problem. It is something that we all need to collectively work on. And there has to be a continuum between sustainability and circularity and climate action, which is our guide towards a vision for the future, a combined vision, practically the only viable vision for the future. There is no life, human life as we know it, at 3 degrees above pre-industrial levels, right? And also the time to act is now. In the sustainability space, we used to go by the definition that sustainability is the ability to use resources in such a way so that we do not hamper the ability of future generations to use resources in the same way. But it's not about that anymore. We are poisoning our soil, earth, water as we speak. We are crossing planetary boundaries as we speak. So it's not something that's going to happen tomorrow. It's something that's happening already. So the time to act was yesterday, but now we'll have to do. So ESG backlash or not is going to have to continue. The world has to continue down this path.
Absolutely. That's a warning bell, I think, for all of us to keep definitely in our minds and actions. Ayush, last words?
Yeah, two things. One, taking your cue from your Venn diagram, we must always remember that these 3 words are part of a much bigger set in the whole universe. And there are many more subsets to these terms, whether we talk of environment, social, or economic terms, which impacts on it, all of us on a day-to-day basis. And these smaller subsets at times assume a bigger stage for an organization or for an individual, because of which they may choose to ignore these aspects of environment, social, or economic terms. So how do we take care of those smaller subsets or irritants which hamper our focus or become barrier to these bigger issues is also important. Often we keep on focusing or we keep on grappling with those smaller issues and forget these bigger issues. That is one thing which we need to identify. These smaller issues or subsets may vary from organization to organization or individual to individual. That will vary. So we need to identify those things and take care of those things first and then focus on these bigger things. I think if we are able to do it, we'll achieve it in a much faster pace, and in a much better manner. Second thing which I wanted to share, again based on my experience, is that like people like us who are part of this summit or the organization, we are aware of these issues, at least so that is what we claim, that we are aware. I don't know how much To what extent we are aware or the implications we understand, that may again be a matter of debate. But in spite of being aware, and let us be humble enough to accept that fact, we also falter. All of us also in our day-to-day life or in our work, in our own organizations, are not able to do what we should be doing. So every day we all must review at the end of the day, each day, what we did in a particular fashion or manner and what we could have done better to make the society or environment or climate more sustainable. Like Madhur was saying, even talking to our parents or grandparents on using a kitchen towel or a tissue or a napkin in a sustainable manner is part of our life. And unless we start doing it on a daily basis, in our homes, at our workplace, or even sitting in a restaurant or going out in a marketplace, or while driving a car or a cycle, this is all we need to remember always and keep improving on a daily basis, so that we are a better person before we tell others to be better. So that is what I think I would like to end with it. Thank you.
Ayush, you can very much become our ambassador because you say exactly what we talk about. That's how we have start with responsible me, and then we have to go towards the ecosystem. And you spoke about the subparts, and that's exactly what we always talk in the systems thinking, because the thematic started with systems thinking on the first day, then the SDGs, then we had, of course, CSR, and today ESG, and then tomorrow's DNI. And all of these are interlinked, as you rightly pointed out, right? They're all subsystems, but at the same time, they're all interlinked in a larger system. So I always say this word about, we have ecosystems, then we have got, super systems, and then we have subsystems, right? So you need to kind of look at that. And as you can see in my background, we have picosystems, which is another topic for another time. But honestly, that is the understanding of the interconnectedness of all these issues that we need to keep talking. And I think what you also said was so practical, that it's an everyday challenge, right? And it starts with me. So yeah, we cannot be perfect all the time, but if you're constantly striving, if you realize that it starts with me and you're constantly striving, you'll also be a little more considerate and sensitive to others who are also struggling and trying to do the best they can. So I think it is a collective effort at the end of the day. And as you know, our theme for the entire summit is think different, act together. So I think on that note, that's really what I'm going to close on. That can we all really take the effort to think different and act together? Today we've got some really simple, very, very practical advice on how we can improve things both in our workplace as well as in our homes. I mean, how we need to be conscious about intergenerational perspectives as well, and therefore, then take a step forward together altogether. So thank you very much, Ayushji. Thank you so much, Madhur. It was so wonderful chatting with you. I think we have a lot of food for thought for all of us here, as well as in the all our viewers who are looking at us just now. And with that, we come to the close to our plenary. Once again, a reminder to everyone, please look out for our wonderful sessions. Incidentally, we'll also have supply chain. We are going to talk of diversity in supply chain for sustainability today at 12:45 p.m. India time. Of course, we have a fantastic session happening in the evening at 7:30 from Lean from Flourishing startups for ecosystem for obviously entrepreneurs, which is going to happen by Lean for Flourishing Canada, who's hosting that session. We have many other very, very interesting sessions. So, and also a lexicon of change, which is talking about the different kinds of new words we need to use. So hopefully we also put in the socio-environnomic in that. And that's being done by Deborah Lipziger from the US. So do join us. We have wonderful speakers from all across the world. A visual sketch noting that's going to happen today by Chris Piyush from the Netherlands. So as you can see, we have people from across the world giving their time and effort. We also have someone from Singapore, Art of Awakening, Tim Hammonds, who's going to do some live sketch noting. So yeah, interesting stuff going to be happening today. Tune in and join us and enjoy. Thank you. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you very much once again. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.